If you guys are looking for a new truck and you've been thinking about getting a diesel, specifically a 4th gen Cummins, or any 6.7 Cummins for that matter, in today's video we're going to be going over the pros and cons of the ownership in the lifetime since I've had my truck. Starting off at our first pro, this is a Cummins engine. Cummins has been known for building reliable engines time and time again for several years. The only time that you really see catastrophic failure with these engines is due to poor maintenance or just lack of good ownership. People don't take care of them. It's not going to take care of you. It's a give and take. More times than not, these engines will outlive pretty much anyone who owns them. They're great engines. People love them. They're strong, they're powerful, and they're reliable. That's my number one reason why I personally bought this truck, was because of the engine that was in it, not everything else around it. Nothing lasts forever, and obviously things break. Another reason why I purchased this vehicle that I feel as a pro is due to the fact that this is an inline 6 motor. There is plenty of room on either side of the engine to do work, whether that is doing a head gasket, injectors, or even changing a turbo. It's very easy to access everything from under the hood. There's a lot of room to work. A lot of the V8 diesels, you have to pull the cab off to do any sort of work to them, and it's a pain in the ass, and you can't really do it in your driveway if you want to do your own work yourself. So I personally bought this because of how easy they are to work on in your parking lot, in your driveway, wherever you are, wherever you need to work on it. It's very accessible under the hood. So just think about that when you're looking at buying a diesel, or any truck for that matter. Think about how easy it would be to work on and access things that you need to. One of the other pros on this truck is it comes factory with the CP3 fuel injection pump. CP4, which is a predecessor to the new pumps now, a lot of your Power Strokes run them. They like to grenade themselves. They're engineered in such a way that the diesel that we use here in the States, it doesn't have enough lubricity to lubricate the actual bearing inside of the CP4 pump, and it will grenade itself, and it will shove metal shavings and glitter all throughout your fuel system, and it'll cause you to have to get new fuel lines, new injectors, you name it. It will cost you $10,000+ in parts and labor to fix something after a CP4 catastrophic failure. So one of the other reasons that I didn't go with a Power Stroke or a Duramax is because they had the CP4 pumps. So this comes with the CP3. Ram actually went to the CP4 in some of the earlier 5th gen models, and they actually went back to the CP3 after realizing it had so many problems and people were just, dropping them left and right. So that's another pro on this truck, is it has a CP3 fuel pump or injection pump. You really don't have to worry about them all that often. Although this is the same for about any diesel nowadays, there is a lot of aftermarket support for these trucks. Whether you need replacement parts or performance parts, they're very readily accessible and easy to find, and you can get them on just about any website that specializes in diesel performance. They're readily accessible pretty much anywhere. Make sure that the aftermarket support is there for the vehicle with whatever you intend to do with it, whether it's reliability, performance, whatever it may be. Just keep an eye out for that, and always think about that when you're purchasing a vehicle. Another thing I like about these trucks is they come with a solid front axle if you go with a 4-wheel drive model. The only other truck that you can buy with a solid front axle would be a F-250 and above, so the Ford platform. Chevy now has independent front suspension, which I'm personally not a fan of. They do ride smoother, but the solid front axle is more reliable, they're stronger. They're a little easier to work on when it comes to doing anything with the actual axle itself, whether you want to re-gear, or you need to replace a locker or add a locker, whatever it may be, and they're a little bit easier to lift and maintain. Also keep that in mind if you're looking at buying a new vehicle as well. I personally myself would prefer a solid front axle over IFS or independent front suspension, which is why I opted for this truck and not a Chevy. Another thing I'd like to note about the drivetrain on this is Ram is the only vehicle that I'm aware of in the US that still offers manual floor shifting transfer case. In my opinion, that'd be the only way I would go. I hate the buttons, I hate the knobs to engage your transfer case. They are consistently unreliable. I myself have known several people that have gone to go into 4-wheel drive and their button just blinks and it never engages. They're notorious for going out, and I would much rather have a floor shifted 4-wheel drive. Now granted, the front axle does have an actuator still, but instead of having 2 actuators, you now only have 1. So you have 1 less moving part to go bad. And for me, that was a pro all the way. That's why I bought the base model Tradesman, just so I could have the floor shifted transfer case. I could talk all day about the pros and things that I love about this truck, but I'm going to end with one more before we go to the cons list. If you delete these trucks, and by delete I mean getting rid of the emission system, the EGR and the DPF system on these trucks, I personally have seen in the upwards of 25 to 35 miles per gallon cruising on the highway. That is unheard of for a 3/4 ton truck. Now, it may be the same for other brands, you know, Ford, Chevy, Powerstroke, Duramax. I don't know. I don't personally have experience with them, so I'm not going to tell you information that I'm not proficient with. But I know for me personally, after doing the tune and delete, I have seen in the upwards of 25 to 35 miles per gallon on the highway. I'll link a video above showing you the upgrades that I have done to this truck that have gotten me to that point. But for now, that's that. Let's go over to the cons. There's not many. Back under the hood we are. Starting on our number one on the cons list, these trucks do not have glow plugs. So when you need to start them in cooler weather, you need to heat the air that's coming into your engine before it can start, because diesels like to start in the heat. They're not a big fan of starting in the cold. Instead of glow plugs, this truck has what's called a grid heater. So a grid heater sits right above your air intake under the hood, and what it has is a electrode basically. And when you turn the key on to the on position, before you turn it on, it heats up this grid. It's a literal grid of just metal, and it will heat it up, and it heats the air as it comes into the intake. What happens is the actual metal rod where the electrical connector sits onto, if you let it heat up for too long, that bolt can corrode. It'll actually arc and corrode, and the little nut that's on it will fall into your intake, and usually it will wreck cylinder number 6. But meaning you're gonna need to get your engine rebuilt or a new engine, which can cost you a lot of freaking money nowadays. So to avoid that, you can get a grid heater delete plate if you live in a warmer climate and it doesn't really get that cold and you don't require that heating element. Or Banks makes a intake horn with their upgraded heating element in it, and I don't think they've had any failures on those yet. But that's one thing that's a con on these trucks, but it's a relatively inexpensive fix that you can do yourself. I live down here in South Florida, so I don't really ever use the grid heater. I don't need it where I am. So I went with the grid heater delete plate, which was, I think, $200, and I did it myself in a couple hours in a driveway with basic hand tools. So it's nothing crazy, it's pretty simple, and that's just one thing to look out for. Again, not a make or break deal. That is just a con. You know, you shouldn't have to do something from the factory. They should just find a way to make it better themselves before selling it. But I'd consider that a con. Not a big con, but it is a con. Now we're on the other side of the hood. These trucks come factory with a VGT turbo, a variable geometry turbo. What that means is there's a vane inside the turbo that opens and closes as needed based off what the truck's computer is telling it to do, to restrict airflow or allow more airflow to flow through the turbo. And it also enables you to have your exhaust brake when towing a heavy trailer or whatever you might be using it for. The problem with the VGT turbos on this truck is the actuator. The actuator is notorious for going bad, and I'm actually fighting this problem right now. My actuator has took a dump. There are a couple fixes and a couple options to remedy this problem. One of them, City Diesel, I know, makes an upgraded actuator. They claim it's stronger and you won't have the problem again after replacing it. Second option you could do is just replace the whole turbo itself. It comes with a new actuator. That's second option. It's just going to happen again though. The third option, which is what I plan on doing, is getting rid of the VGT and going to a fixed vane turbo. So I'm actually going to be removing this turbo, removing this exhaust manifold, putting in a new exhaust manifold and a new fixed vane turbo. I think I'm going to go with like a S363, which once I save enough money to do that, I'm going to be making a video on how to do that. So that's just another thing to look out for. It's not a huge deal. I currently have my actuator unplugged with my vane open, so I can still drive it. It's just not performing optimally like it should be, and it's not efficient. I do lack a lot of low-end torque. I feel like I'm driving a truck with a huge turbo when I'm not. So that's one thing to look out for. It's not a huge deal. It's not a make or break for me to not buy the truck, but that is one thing to watch out for, and it is a con, in my opinion. I think they should, if they were going to go with the VGT, like many other truck brands, find a way to make a better actuator. but that's just my opinion. Quite sure you guys are waiting for this one. The transmissions. I hear a lot of people say that the 68 RFE transmissions are doo-doo, which they are. They're not great. But you can get them optioned in two other types of transmissions, the G56, which is the manual, and the ASIN, which is in the heavier duty high outputs like your 3500s. But a majority of these trucks have the 68 RFEs. They are not strong transmissions. They are very weak. They can be unreliable. They have a lot of issues with the valve body. The gears, 4 to 6 clutch packs like to just exit the chat randomly. They do make valve body fixes for them, and there is a lot of aftermarket support whether you want to rebuild your factory transmission or you want to go with an upgraded transmission with a totally different one. But that is a con. I try to baby this truck. I don't try to abuse it. I'm trying to hold on to the transmission as long as I can because I cannot afford to put a new one or rebuild this one right now. So with that being said, that will conclude our video. If it were me, I'd say pull the trigger, buy it. I love this truck. Does it have its issues? 100%. What truck doesn't? But in my opinion, they're easier to fix on this and they're less prominent. I appreciate y'all sticking to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, like, comment, do whatever you want to do. If you guys got different pros, different cons, let me know in the comments. Speak your mind. The comments are a free section. Be mean. I don't care. Eventually, I'm going to be making another video. If you do decide to buy yourself a 6.7 Cummins, I'm going to be making a video. Hopefully it will be out next week, 1 week after today, of what to look for when purchasing a 6.7. Things to watch out for, how to check things, just basically give you an overall used car buyer's guide. If you guys like that and you want to see more of it, subscribe to my channel, comment some things that you want to see on the channel, and whatever it is. I want this YouTube thing to take off. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thanks for sticking around and watching.